Alright, as you can see behind me, we have our snowplow truck. This is our 96 Chevy Silverado snowplow. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this bumper. We had a little bit of a collision. I'll show you kind of what happened. We backed into a tree this winter pushing snow. We're going to pull the bumper off. I got a spare bumper right here from our donor truck. We're going to go ahead and put that on. Now, I'm not going to show you how to remove the bumper. It's pretty easy. There's just a few bolts. But I am going to show you how to actually do the repair and remove the moldings. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we had a little bit of a problem here this year. We backed into a tree with our snowplow truck. As you can see, there's quite a bit of damage there. So we're going to remove this bumper. I got another bumper off our donor truck that we're going to put on here. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, I will show you how to remove this bumper. So what you need to do is there's two bolts right here that you need to remove. And there's two bolts on this side. They kind of bolt together. And then you also need to remove these two bolts down in here. Right up in here. Get a lot of traffic over here. So you can kind of see those two bolts need to be at least loosened so that you can slide out the bumper. So what you need to do to remove it, you got to remove these two bolts. And then there's a bolt back here, right there. And then there's also a bolt here that needs to come up from underneath the frame. And then you got to remove those two bolts right up in there to release this to slide it out. Alright, so that helped a little bit. Now I'm going to try hammer and dolly to get a little bit closer. Let's use the point. Let me get a better angle for you. Alright, now I got a little bit different angle for you guys. So I was able to get this side right here to kind of bounce out. Now I'm going to try to come in here and hit it with the point right in this area right here. Okay, so just with about 10 minutes of hammer and dolly, we've been able to get it kind of close, but we still have to work this area here quite a bit. You guys see that angle? But this is starting to bounce out really nice. So I'm going to kind of work on that a little bit and set the camera back a little bit. Alright, so now what I'm going to use, this is called a dolly spoon and a ball peen hammer. What I'm going to try to do is get up in here and just kind of pry on it a little bit to pry it out and get it somewhat straighter. Now some of this you won't be able to see on camera, but I'm just going to kind of work on it, just kind of push it out a little bit. I can see that my angle's right up there. So, and what I might do is put this flat there and then hit it with the hammer. Use the 3-pound. Okay, I don't know if you can actually see the dimension, but it's still pretty deep right here, but we've got a really hard crevice to kind of work around. So what I'm going to actually need to do is I'm going to just need to kind of wedge in there with the hammer, and I'm going to knock this side down here to kind of help pop this out. What would be really good at this point is to weld on some bolts right here so that I could actually pull it out. I'm probably going to go ahead and set up the welder and do that now. Alright, that's about as good as I can get it from here. I've hit on that pretty hard. It's a lot better, but I am going to have to weld on some tabs right here and kind of pry on it to get it out. So I'm going to move it into the shop and show you how to do that next step. Go through to do the finishing and weld on a couple studs to kind of pull it out. So let me take you over here, give you a little closer look and see what we're going to do here. First step, we want to make sure we disconnect the battery. That's always the most important. I like to disconnect the positive and negative both and turn the key on. Let the circuits all go to sleep and drain from any current flow. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our die grinder with the 40 grit wheel, and we're just going to grind a spot here and grind a spot here so that we have somewhere to weld our bolts to. Now these bolts will serve as clecos where we can actually kind of tug on it and pull as we're hitting it from behind. Because of the crease is so severe, you can't really get enough force behind it. But what you want to remember when you're doing this, you got a high spot here and a low spot here. You want to weld that right in the middle of the low spot so that you can kind of wiggle it and pull it out as you hit from behind. Same thing here. I want to weld that right there in that low spot. So what I'm going to need to do is take my die grinder and grind those low spots so that I have something clean to weld to. We'll do that now. As I can. I'm just going to hold this in place and kind of spot weld it in. Okay, I don't have a very good ground, so I'll try to get a better spot on it. I tried to weld a bolt onto it, but it just wouldn't do it. So I got up in there and just hammered and dollied it. Actually come out pretty good. I feel it's pretty straight enough for mud. It don't look too bad at all. And then what I did is I just hit some undercoating on the inside here to kind of help, you know, for corrosion, that kind of thing. And then we'll paint it at the end, but I'm gonna just go ahead and put some mud on it right now. Get kind of a first coat on there. Alright, so we've got this pretty close to where we need it to be. I basically got some 80 grit on a sanding block. Just kind of sand it down a little bit so that the Bondo can stick. I've already done that. Then we're going to mix up our mud, which we've got some other videos on how to do that, so I'm not going to kind of go through that. You guys kind of know how that process works. So to get this all mixed up real good, now I'm actually using a metal spatula. I like those a little bit better. They're a little bit more durable. For me, they don't seem to move as much, and they get more air pockets out. That's one thing you don't want when you're doing mud work, is air pockets. So get this all mixed up so that's blended real good. And I mixed it pretty hot because it's still kind of cold out here. Just snowed last night. So I'm just going to take a little bit, just kind of lightly coat it in there. Now I've used duct tape or Gorilla Tape to kind of mask out the outer edge. I want to try to keep my repair contained to as little of an area as possible. And if you mix the right amount of mud, you should have just enough to do the area that you're doing and not too much left over. And it looks like to me I'm pretty close to what I needed. Now this is mixed a little bit hot and also a little thick, but I'm going to grind most of this down. Being this is our first coat, it's not going to be perfect. come back in 15 minutes. Alright, so I've let that sit for about, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Now, got a couple things I'm going to use. This is called a cheese grater. This doesn't have to be actually real perfect because most of it's covered by the bumper. Except for about from here to here, it's not covered. So I'm going to use this just because it helps grade this down really fast. And all you do, you want to make sure you're using it when it's still kind of curing and it's not all the way fully cured. It just gets the high spots off. And just do a real light pressure. Let's run over this for a few minutes and I'll come back and I'll show you the next step. Alright, now that I hit that with the cheese grater, knock that down for about 5 minutes, I'm going to go over it with some 40 grit just to break down the high spots. Not real hard, just a light cross. Very simple. Don't have to be a lot. Alright, now I'm going to take this 40 grit off and I'm going to grab some 60 grit and I'm going to go to 180, then 220, then 320, then we'll hit it with some primer. Okay, so I've done 2 coats of mud. Now I'm just going to use what's called the glazing putty. Now if you wanted to go to full extent, you know, this is a show car, something like that, I wouldn't recommend doing it this way. But all we're going to be doing is just putting a spot glaze on it to kind of get rid of some of the pinholes and little fine scratches. And then I'll put some primer on it from there. So it's a Bondo glazing putty. I just put some on my finger and just kind of smooth it in. And then I'll come back in a few minutes to sand it off. Okay, now that I've layered all this, I've got some water and some 400 grit. And I'm just going to wet sand it and get ready for primer. Do this until it's nice and flat, and I can see that it's going to take a little bit of time to do it, so I'll just come back in a few minutes when it's all done and sanded. Okay, now that I've got that all sanded, I'm going to remove the duct tape, kind of clean the edges a little bit with some sandpaper, kind of a little rough sanding around the edges. Then I'm going to put some masking tape on it, put my first coat of primer. Alright, so I'm sanding it down pretty good. Now I've only got a black primer. I'm just going to spray some of that on there and just kind of hit the metal spots, kind of orange peel those in first. It's always a good idea to hit the metal parts first so that you can kind of get a little build-up and then you have some primer to stick to the next coat. Alright, so I hit it with the second coat. I'm going to go over it now with the third coat. A little bit thicker than the first coat, a little thicker than the second coat. You want to build up the scratches to kind of get those all out. And I'll come back for the fourth coat. My fourth coat, and thicker than the other 2 coats. Alright, so we put about 4 coats of primer on there. I'm just going to take off the tape and I'm just going to do a sanding, just kind of sand it and feather it into the edges so I can do a blend coat. Alright, so we just basically primered it in black and take some 300 grit and just kind of feather out the edges. And this will be all I do. And then I'm going to put some white paint on it and we'll be all done. I'm going to show you guys a little trick. Take your masking tape, fold it over in half so sticky side's facing out, and then just put it on your area that you're going to paint. What that's going to do is give it a non-hard edge so the paint can kind of blow underneath it. We'll go ahead and tape that all off and get ready for paint. Now we're just going to use some Rust-Oleum clear coat base for this. Something you can pick up at Walmart, but like I say, we're just doing touch-up, so it's not that big of a deal. Most of this is covered by the bumper. But I'm just going to do a really quick light coat first. Alright, so here's a final look of what she came out like. I think she did pretty good. Got the bumper mounted back on. Got the moldings. Now we never had to take those moldings off. We just did it with them on there. I think it come out pretty decent. Now it's not perfect. It's an old truck. You know, it's a 96. I just didn't want it to rust, and I wanted it to look somewhat professional. And I think it come out pretty good. You stand back, you look at it, you can't even tell it was crushed in. So I would say mission accomplished. I believe it came out pretty decent. So let me know what you guys think. The paint blended pretty decently. We do have a little bit of a imperfection right here and a little imperfection right here because we just used rattle can, but I think it matches the factory color pretty decent. So anyway, there you go. That's how you fix it. Alright, so there you have it. Fixed the dent, fixed the bumper, replaced the bumper, repainted the bumper caps. Took us about, probably about 12 hours to do the whole process. These bumpers are kind of a pain in the butt to get aligned. There's so many different bolts that you have to line up, but I kind of spared that so you guys didn't have to watch us fight aligning it. But it usually takes 2 or 3 people to line the rear bumper. But it came out pretty good. There's no rust, no dent, and looks like it'll last us another year. So please rate, subscribe, and comment, and look for the other video that we did on repairing and removing the front, or removing the rear bumper, and the link in the description down below. Talk to you later.